And we are back again, and this time we are going to have a look at configuration. Flutter, which is a framework, needs to be configured in different ways. This is in order to have things like fonts and images in the proper location, and how to address them, and how it eventually will be compiled, and so on. Much of this is done in a file called pubspec YAML, where YAML is described as a human readable data serialization language. It is a way of defining packages and assets and locations and a lot of other stuff as well in Flutter itself. So going to this file, which is in the root of your project, you will find that it has a number of things. For example, the name of your application, the description of it, which you could and should change, and version and stuff like that, but also what SDK to use, which is the environment, which in this case is Dart, and we'll soon see in a live example here that it's no longer less than 3.0, since 3.0 has been released. We see that this is a Dart project, and therefore in order to use Flutter, we need to say that we need to use the Flutter SDK. It states what Cupertino icons we want to use, which we won't in these examples, and so on. A little bit of the dependencies that we are going to use. It has both dependencies and dev dependencies, and it depends a little bit on where to put it. Usually packages that you use are either very specific, or, as we'll see later on, it's possible to do it really easily. After that, there's the use of material design and so on. Right, let's just have a check in VS Code, where we can see the pubspec.yaml over here. We'll take it from the beginning. This is for a newer version of Flutter, so we can see that it should be greater than 3 but less than 4, for example, and we have all the dependencies as before, and we'll see a little bit lower down here how to handle things like fonts, for example, but we'll get to that in the next slide. So one thing that you might want to do is to add fonts, and there are two ways to add fonts to a project. You can either have them locally, and then we need to find fonts or typefaces in TTF, TTC or OTF format. They can be downloaded from several places, and you should only use the ones that are free, of course. In our case, we will create a folder, a normal folder in the root of the Flutter project, and we'll call it fonts, and we'll put the fonts inside of it. I'll show you. And then we need to do an update in pubspec YAML in order to use these fonts. And we do that by saying, like we can see over here, fonts, the name of them, and exactly what assets they are. So assets are basically files that we are going to use. And it's important to understand that indentation matters. So it needs to be exactly with the number of tabs and so on that we can see over here. So fonts, and then we say what family, and then the real assets, the fonts themselves. And these need to be placed relative to the PubSpec YAML, so fonts. So that means that I need to have a folder over here which is called fonts, and it has these two fonts inside of it. But that's it from a configuration standpoint. What we then need to do is to use the font in our application, and we can do that by setting it either locally per entry or globally. We will mainly be looking at doing it locally, but if we would like to set it globally, we do that with the theme constructor parameter, named constructor parameter. And we put that to theme data, and we say we want to use a font family. And then we use it all over the application. But if we, on the other hand, would like to do it for specific widgets, we use the style property together with a text style widget. And we'll see that in our example right now, where we have again a new app, and it's basically from the same template as we did in the last lecture, with a material app using a scaffold, having an app bar, and then we have a center and a text. The new thing is this one, namely that we want to use the font family Railway, okay, I've never said it before. In this example, we see that we are using it because there is this other look to it than we had before, but we can barely see that we are using something. So why not add to this a little bit by saying come over here and say that we want a font size, so let's say 28, like this, and we want a font style, and let's say font style italic, and we also want a font weight, which should be font weight bold, right, and we can skip that one. But if we save over here, we see that we got a much bigger "May the Force be with you." Notice that we put the first comma over here inside of the parentheses, so that we can add to the text style named constructor parameters. And we use the font size, font style, font weight like this. So this is one way of using fonts or typefaces, and it works great. But it's also possible to use Google Fonts. So you've probably gone to the webpage fonts.google.com, and you see there's a bunch of typefaces over there that you can or should not use. That's up to you. They are free to use, but some of them look like, and some of them are really, really great. There is a package called Google Fonts that we can use in order to download the fonts directly from there to our application. And there are pros and cons of doing this. It's easier to change. You don't need to download anything yourself. However, offline support will be limited, and first time we need to download the stuff, and therefore it will take a little bit of a longer time. In the end, it's up to you as a programmer how to do it. I said that this Google Fonts was a package in Flutter, and like all modern frameworks and you name it, programming languages and so on, Flutter also has a package manager. It's called Pub, and the official documentation for these packages are available on pub.dev. and there's loads of packages available there. You can search for example, Google Fonts, and you will get a web page up which says what this specific package is for, what SDKs it supports, and so on. Also have a look at the popularity score to see if it is any good. For the pub.dev for the Google Fonts, this is a bit of an older screenshot, but it looks something like this, and we can see that it works for the Flutter SDK, and it works on Android, iOS, Linux, macOS, web, and Windows. It also has a rather great popularity score of 100%. Here you will see everything on how to install and use this, and possibly links to other places as well. So if we want to use this, we need to install the package, and we can do that a number of ways. We can run Flutter pub add Google Fonts. We can use pubspec directly, go to the dependencies and add Google Fonts, and then do a pub get, or just by saving it. And then we need, of course, to import it into where we want to use it. And we'll have a look over here on how to do this. And let's have a new terminal up, because usually it's kind of a nice way of doing it. So Flutter pub add Google Fonts, like this. Enter, and it will go out to the internet, and it will have a look at what it needs, and we see that it needs quite a lot of other stuff as well, but it fixes it. It downloads what we need, and then we can go to pubspec, and somewhere here there should now be a Google Fonts, and it's now version 4.0.5 currently when we are doing this. All right, that means that we could try this out. Let's put these back again and see if copying pasting will work this time. We'll do a save, and we'll see. Sometimes it needs to really reload when we do these larger changes. It performs a hot reload, but no, it hasn't changed. So let's restart the application instead and see if we can get this to work. You can see that we are importing the Google Fonts start like this, and let's pause. And one pause later, which you are grateful for not being with, because it took some time to restart the application. But that was all that I did. I closed it and I restarted it. And now we can see that it is using the Acme font instead. And how did we do that? Well, apart from, of course, then importing Google Fonts, we also in style used Google Fonts class, call for Acme, and we set the font size. And we can, of course, do all the other stuff like making it bold, italics, and so on as well. But it makes it a little bit easier to do instead of downloading and keeping all your fonts in the application, while that is, of course, possible as well. So, is there more that can be done with fonts and other assets? Yes, of course. you will see that we are going to revisit PubSpec YAML from time to time in order to add configuration for it, for the Flutter project that we're working with. We will refer to the pub.dev and so on. Please go to pub.dev because there's plenty of interesting stuff there and things that you will need later on in this course as well. So if you are a Flutter developer, you will probably hang out on pub.dev. But that's all for this time. See you in the next one. Bye for now.